Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. A very hearty welcome to the Value Reporting Foundation's webinar entitled A Transition to Integrated Reporting, a Guide to Getting Started. So I hope this will be an absolutely thrilling webinar for those of you who are planning to get started, and for those of you who are already started, there'll be lots of exciting stuff that you'll learn. We have a great lineup of speakers for today. I shall start by introducing myself, which is always helpful. So I'm Jeremy Osborne. I'm Director of Business Relationships and Networks with the Value Reporting Foundation. Hopefully you all know that the Value Reporting Foundation was born in June this year of the merger of the IIRC and the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board in America. So we're still relatively new, but delighted to be hosting this webinar on behalf of the Value Reporting Foundation. And as I said, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers for today's webinar. We're going to kick off with Lisa French. Many of you will know Lisa from her work as the Chief Technical Officer of the Integrated Reporting Framework, and has been a stalwart of integrated reporting for I think more than a decade now, which is fantastic. We also have, I think that's Cora Olsen rather than Coral Olsen, although Coral Olsen is an extremely nice name. But Cora Olsen is Director of Sustainability and Regeneration with Better Energy. Many of you will know Cora from prior webinars when she's spoken on behalf of Novo Nordisk. And Cora has also served and continues to serve on the Integrated Reporting Framework Boards, has been key to the developments of the framework. And then we also have Michael Gebert from ENBW. ENBW, again, has been another long-standing supporter of the integrated reporting movement and is an energy company in Baden-Württemberg. I think I've got that right with the BW. Right. I hope I have, because I'm just inventing this all on the hoof. Many thanks, Michael, for joining us. And Michael has also been a long-standing supporter of the integrated reporting movement. So we've got three real experts with us today. And the agenda for today's event will, as I said, Lisa will provide an overview of the guide. She's been very instrumental to the drafting of this guide, and the guide will be available for download from the Value Reporting Foundation website after this webinar. Then Cora will share some top tips for implementing integrated reporting, and then we'll have a case study from Michael with ENBW. So I think between the three of them, we're going to have a fantastic series of insights into integrated reporting and the challenges and the benefits from adoption of the integrated reporting framework. As you may have heard at the beginning, all of the delegates are in listen-only mode. So if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A chat function, which you'll find on the right of your laptop or computer screen. And we'll do our best to address those questions. And if we get some similar questions, we'll consolidate them. So we'll have a Q&A session at the end. I'm sure there'll be a lively series of questions asked, and our panelists will do their best to respond to those. And then we'll have some closing remarks before we finish the webinar. So without any further ado, I'll hand over the floor to Lisa, and I, for one, am very excited to see the Getting Started guide. So Lisa, over to you.
Wonderful, and thanks very much, Jeremy, and a good day to you all. It's a pleasure to spend some time with you. So as advertised, we are very pleased to introduce our publication, Transition to Integrated Reporting, a Guide to Getting Started. So this guide targets those who are on the cusp of integrated reporting or quite early in their integrated reporting journey. That said, I think even those who are more mature in their integrated reporting approach will still pick up a useful tip or two. And although my remarks today generally target report preparers, those in investing, consulting, and academia might pick up some useful nuggets today, if not from my comments, then certainly from those of my fellow panelists who live and breathe this in their daily work. Now, before we move on, It's worth noting that we started writing this guide back when we were the International Integrated Reporting Council, or the IIRC, and we're now part of the Value Reporting Foundation, which we, of course, know and understand, but which may be less familiar to you. So I'll spend a few moments explaining who we are. So with that, let's dive in. So who are we as the Value Reporting Foundation? Well, we're the product of the merger of the IRC and SASB, Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. And right off the bat, yes, the Integrated Reporting Framework and SASB standards still exist. So think of the Value Reporting Foundation as a holding company, one global organization with a unified strategy, a single governing board, and 3 principal resources or tools for both businesses and investors. And those resources are shown here. So integrated thinking principles, the integrated reporting framework, and SASB standards. And these resources make it easier for businesses to communicate long-term strategy and to provide a more holistic view of corporate performance to investors. Next, we want to advance a simplified corporate reporting system by more closely aligning the integrated reporting framework and SASB standards. And part and parcel of our quest to simplify the reporting space is our active support of the Technical Readiness Working Group of the IFRS Foundation as it looks to launch an International Sustainability Standards Board. And we see sustainability disclosures and indeed integrated reports as critical to simplified reporting. So speaking of integrated reports, starting on the left side of the screen, we often describe the integrated report as a concise communication about value creation over time. And there's a lot packed into this short phrase. So to be decision useful, the integrated report should be concise, focused, and understandable. And it should also center on the organization's ability to create value, recognizing that the value created for the organization is inextricably linked to the value it creates for others. And finally, the integrated report considers multiple timeframes. So it addresses past performance, of course, but it does so with an eye on the future. And that future includes the short, medium, and long term. Now, looking at that circular diagram below, I want to point out that although the integrated report is the product of integrated reporting, the report itself is not actually the end game. Instead, integrated reporting drives integrated thinking and behavioral change by both businesses and their investors. So indeed, integrated reporting and integrated thinking go hand in hand. Now, in terms of uptake, and looking to the right-hand panel, the integrated reporting framework has been adopted in some 75 countries, and its principles are used by over 2,500 organizations. And finally, integrated reporting has seen support from over 40 stock exchanges around the world. So in developing the guide to getting started, we were fortunate to draw on a wealth of perspectives in terms of, what's worked and what hasn't. And insights from these discussions are reflected in the guide we're launching today. So next slide. In terms of content, the guide includes the 6 chapters shown here. So the first chapter summarizes the basics of integrated reporting. And I do want to emphasize here that the guide is a companion to the framework, not a substitute for the framework. So it's an important point to bear in mind. The second chapter focuses on finding motivation or catalyst for adopting integrated reporting, one that truly resonates with the organization and builds a sense of momentum. So whether the goal is to better understand how the organization creates, preserves, or erodes value, or to better align strategy with day-to-day operations, this chapter encourages preparers to develop a compelling and custom-fit purpose for integrated reporting. The third chapter sets some important groundwork, including securing top-level support, appointing appropriate resources, and other measures we've heard over the years from the pioneers of integrated reporting. Next, the guide gets into translating the concepts of integrated reporting into practical implementation, starting with choosing an appropriate vehicle or report form. And this chapter is highlighted, as we'll come back to it in a few moments. And the same goes for the 5th chapter, which presents a sample roadmap. And finally, chapter 6 recaps key messages and points to additional resources, including examples, case studies, and frequently asked questions. These tools and resources cover a broad range of topics, including the integrated reporting framework content, the concept of integrated thinking, and assurance considerations. Okay, so I promised a deeper dive into two areas, starting with the section on translating concepts into practical implementation. And as this slide shows, there are several ways an organization can get started. And indeed, we've seen all 5 of these options in action. So we've seen some organizations apply the integrated reporting framework to internal performance management reporting in the first instance, and then transition this to their external reporting over time. And this is reflected in option A. Others have applied the integrated reporting framework to an existing investor-focused report, whether it's the annual report, management commentary, strategic report, or other report form. And this is captured in option B. Still others prefer to go with option C, which embeds the principles of integrated reporting into an existing non-investor report, like a governance, operating, or sustainability report. Option D takes a clean slate approach, whereby the organization publishes an integrated report from scratch, and in addition to the annual report or regulatory filing. This becomes a way to segue from the traditional investor report to the integrated report. And finally, option E combines existing content from the proxy statement, for instance, the Form 10K, management commentary, and sustainability report. So all of the information from these inputs combined as a precursor to better integration over time. And obviously, this is a choice that each organization needs to make for itself based on its own circumstances. But the beauty of this chapter of the guide is it explores the pros and cons of each approach in a very neutral way. So as a report preparer, having consulted chapter 4 of the guide and decided on your preferred vehicle for integrated reporting, you can now turn your attention to developing a suitable roadmap. And this brings us to chapter 5, which is a sample roadmap that opens with guidance on getting organized. And it does so by drawing on input from those on the front line of integrated reporting. It also walks preparers through the process of developing an action plan by prompting the business to consider reporting boundaries, to take stock of current reporting, including major gaps, and to look through the lens of the integrated reporting framework's 3 fundamental concepts. The roadmap's 3rd stage gets deeper into the process by addressing information needs. And this is where we see the materiality determination process come into play, as well as early thoughts on how information will be communicated. This will have an impact on who should be involved and how information should be collected. This chapter also looks at the adequacy of existing systems and controls, including those related to stakeholder engagement, to ensuring the reliability of collected data, and to supporting audit and assurance activities. The 5th section gets into preparing report content based on the integrated reporting framework's 8 required content elements. And it provides advice on getting ahead of the game and taking a strategic approach to report preparation. It also reinforces the framework's 7 guiding principles, which further inform report content and presentation. And finally, there's a section devoted to continual improvement, which focuses on enhancing the efficiency and effectiveness of the integrated reporting approach in subsequent years. Now, each of these major stages provides 3 actionable steps reflected in the 3 white dots for each line. And so I've highlighted the final step in this establishing a plan stage, which involves developing a clear multi-year plan. And we'll turn our attention to this now. So this is an illustrative plan for how an organization might fully adopt the integrated reporting framework, and in particular, its 19 requirements. So you see the 3 columns representing years 1, 2, and 3, with the preparer focusing on satisfying or meeting 9 requirements in the first year, 6 in the second, and 4 in the third. And the required paragraphs are shown in brackets. Now, generally speaking, though not exclusively, the upper section of each column in light gray focuses more on the integrated reporting framework's content elements. So what's our business model, or what are the key factors and trends at play in our given industry or region? And these areas can be prepared fairly discreetly, in the sense that in year one, once you've really nailed down how you want to depict the business model, you can then turn your attention to governance disclosures, for example, in year two. Of course, these areas will be refreshed, perhaps revamped with each reporting period. But once that core content is developed, subsequent changes are more incremental than they are intensive. As for the dark gray segment at the bottom of each column, these tend to be preparatory and presentational considerations as captured in the framework's guiding principles. And once started, they continue with each reporting period without fail. So, for example, ensuring the reliability and completeness of disclosed information becomes simply automatic each and every year. Now, just a quick caveat here. So what you see on the screen is not a template that all organizations should simply pick up and apply. Rather, the goal here is to inspire preparers to develop their own plans based on their own circumstances. Okay, so with that said, just a few final words on the guide before I hand over to Cora. So throughout the guide, you'll find a series of navigational tools that include framework-defined terms, as shown in the upper left of this slide. And staying with the left-hand column, you'll also see these making the connection boxes, which reinforce the links between what an organization might do from day to day and what the integrated reporting framework expects in terms of its reporting principles and requirements. We've found that in making these connections, many of the elements of the integrated reporting process become ingrained and logical rather than burdensome and compliance-oriented. Looking at the right-hand column, several tip boxes share the experience of others who've already started their integrated reporting journey and have found ways to avoid pitfalls or to become more efficient. And finally, a series of reality check boxes help to debunk myths and clarify framework intent based on common questions and misconceptions that we've heard over the years. And where applicable, these reality check boxes make reference to related framework paragraphs to help you work between these two resources, so between the Getting Started guide and the framework. So that's our quick orientation to the guide that we're launching today. You can access the full guide at integratedreporting.org. Again, integrated reporting, all one word, .org. We'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap up and just note that wherever you are on your integrated reporting journey or however you contribute to the integrated reporting movement, again, I'm very mindful our audience isn't 100% report preparers today. We hope the guide is helpful in inspiring some thinking and planning of your own. Again, we are very fortunate to hear from two preparers today. I'm going to step aside at this point so we can enjoy their perspectives. And with that, a sincere thank you. And I want to hand over to Cora for her perspectives. Over to you, Cora.
Thank you very much, Lisa. If we can move into my slides, please. There are a few. Thank you very much. It really is a great pleasure to be here today. And I will be sharing or spending a bit of time sharing my experience and some top tips in terms of moving this process forward. And there will be some overlap with what Lisa has already shared with you, but hopefully I can add a bit more, what you can say, operational context to the information. So if we can move on, please. So just for the sake of context right now, I work for an energy company called Better Energy that developed, construct, and operate solar panel parks. It's a new company that's only 4 years old. And I joined only a few weeks ago after spending, like Jeremy said, the 12 past years at Novo Nordisk working on their integrated report. Next slide, please. So before we can actually move into the whole reporting process, we need to make sure that the thinking and management aspect is in place also, because it's impossible to do proper reporting if you don't have what you can say sort of like the backbone of the company in place to do so. There has to be some focus on the governance, like Lisa said. How do you work it? Is it in your company bylaws? How do you work with it in policies and strategies? What about remuneration? What about targets? How do you take it into account from the outside in perspective? So there's a lot of work that actually goes into understanding and embedding this whole notion of integrated thinking and management into the day-to-day operations of the business. And it's not something that can be done overnight. It's usually an incremental process. So this is not an exhaustive list, but just to serve as inspiration for those of you who are at the beginning of this process. The next slide, please. So what is it that actually needs to be integrated in terms of thinking and management and reporting? I think we can all agree on that the whole notion of shareholder value being the sole purpose of companies and reporting is outdated. Then came a time where shared value was very much in focus, and that was nice because then the companies got to tell all the great stuff that they were doing in terms of creating value for society and the company itself. But the flaw with shared value is that it does not take into account the negative impacts of companies. So integrated thinking and management has to be about understanding business as part of society and the environment. And that may sound really logical, and that's of course a given, but it actually hasn't been the way many companies have been thinking and reporting. So on taking this perspective and mapping that into the company is actually crucial if one is to do integrated reporting over time. Language is extremely important. There are so many, thanks. Language is important because there are so many words being used around this integration, this systems thinking. There's CSR, there's sustainability, there's ESG, there's non-financial. It's all very, very confusing. So the conversation that I've tried to have inside the company has been very much focused on issues. What about health and safety? What about living wage? What about human rights? Instead of coming with my sustainability hat or CSR hat, I've been trying to have the issue-specific conversation instead, because basically it's about understanding risk to business, but definitely also from business. And I find that having the sustainability or CSR or non-financial reference actually not very conducive for the internal conversation, because for some people that's just simply like a turn off, or they don't see themselves as being part of that conversation. So for me, a key piece has been actually just talking about the issues, because the buckets are actually not relevant for the conversation. Change management is often incremental unless a crisis occurs. There's nothing like a crisis to actually move the business forward quickly, but preferably the way should actually be to proactively understand the risks to business and from business and try to manage them in an integrated fashion. There's also a definite need to overcome this short-termism, this whole thinking of quarter to quarter. And we need to step away, coming back to the language conversation, in terms of sustainability or non-financial being a conversation about, oh, that's costs. That's cost to business. We cannot afford it. Shifting the conversation into actually being about long-term investing in the company and the future that we are all in. The next slide, please. So just to give you a bit more context around at least how I see ESG versus sustainability, the conversation around value creation and value destruction, there is a lot of clutter and misunderstanding in terms of what is that many tend to equal ESG with sustainability, but that's not how I see it. I see sustainability as being part of ESG. Sustainability is about mitigating all negative impacts. It's about the ability to sustain. So once there are no longer any negative impacts, then you are actually sustainable. ESG is this whole universe of factors or information that is not directly financial. And just because something is not directly financial does not make it sustainability just because you improve that parameter. And on the slide, you can just see examples of that. So just reducing energy consumption and also then hence reducing CO2 emissions is actually not sustainability. That's just as bad. To be sustainable, you actually have to have zero CO2 emissions. And to actually create value, you have to help other people get access to more renewable energy or help them reduce their CO2 emissions. I hope that this is helpful in terms of making that translational piece in the conversation, because that's actually the two latter ones, the break-even piece and the value creation, the positive pursuits, is actually the really interesting conversation to happen within the company, where you actually move the needle in terms of the value destruction and value creation conversation. The next slide, please. Now moving into reporting. Now I gave some insights into the whole thinking, which was really, really quickly. And for those of you that are just at the early stages of this, I fully understand that this might seem a bit overwhelming. But I mean, please reach out to me after if you're interested in continuing the conversation. And I know that there's plenty of resources available also. But in terms of the reporting piece, like Lisa said, it's really important to do sort of an analysis of where you are. And what we did when I was with Novo Nordisk was we took the integrated reporting framework, and then we looked at all the adherence criteria in the framework. And then we mapped it to our current reporting, and then we built a plan, like pretty much like the slide that Lisa shared, showing, so what do we want to fix in the current year? What do we want to fix next year in terms of closing gaps, and then moving forward? And then we, at the same time, mapped the internal stakeholders we needed to engage with to make that progress happen. It's extremely important to identify and engage with people in due time. It's always great to engage with the people that are fans and that are supporters, but it's also extremely important to get people that are not necessarily by day one fans of this, to try to get them to see what this is and actually understand why they are opposing it. It was actually those conversations that helped move us forward. We actually understood what the opposers' concerns were. Like Lisa also said, a materiality assessment is crucial to not drown in information. What I usually use is the Future Fit Business Benchmark and the SASB standards to get an initial indication of what are the sustainability disclosures that we need to look at initially. It's actually it's really good guidance to use those two documents together, because one defines the break even or the sustainability plateau that we all need to reach. And when you put SASB on top, you get the very sector specific information that you must include also. So those two together are really, really powerful, setting it into an integrated reporting framework context. Like Lisa also said, it's really important to understand short, medium, and long-term value creation and be very clear on how that is defined. That varies across sector. The pharma sector works with one set of years, while the fast fashion sector, I assume, works with a different perspective. So being clear on that also in the reporting is actually very, very important. One thing that's often really, really overlooked is actually this whole notion of data quality. Data quality for financial reporting is usually, or not usually, is hardcore, because it's a compliance requirement. It's a huge business risk if internal controls and data quality is not 100% safeguarded for financial reporting. The same can unfortunately not be said for the softer measurements or ESG disclosures or whatever you choose to call it. There's often a lot more loose approach to that whole data collection piece, which is actually quite devastating, because if you don't have that good discipline, then you cannot make appropriate decisions. So a key advice from me also is to be very focused on making sure that the disclosures that you do collect and report on that are not directly financial also becomes part of the data quality process, because it is absolutely fundamental, also because investors rely on this information. Push for continuous improvement. One of the things that some find frustrating in this integrated reporting space, but which is also one of the things that excite me, is that we're never actually done. The world continuously changes, the organization continuously changes, so there's always room for improvement. And it's important that we as rapporteurs push the reporting and the companies and the stakeholder community around the company forward in this whole conversation, so that we actually make real progress over time. And second last but not least, like I said, understand the value creation and the value destruction, being very clear on what is just less bad, what is actually sustainability, and when do we move into actually creating value beyond just the bottom line for ourselves. Last but not least, it's really important to be realistic. It's really important to be patient. I'm a very impatient person myself, but this is all about change management. And as I said in the beginning, this is oftentimes incremental. So be patient, but be relentless. Keep going at it. Keep, pushing people. Make sure that the process move forward. Kick butt and repeat. So this is a circular process. Like I said, it never ends. But there has to be people within the organization that actually are the engines of this process, making sure that the company moves forward. And that was my last slide. And now it's a great pleasure to pass the word on to Michael, whom I will give the word to. Thank you.
Thank you, Cora. Yes, I'm glad to tell you now in the next minutes about our experience when we introduce integrated reporting. My name is Michael Gebhardt, and I've been working now for EnBW for over 15 years, and I'm a member of the finance team. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Yes. Before we jump into integrated reporting, I will tell you shortly who we are, and then where are we today with our integrated reporting before we come now to the details of our implementation project. Yes. What is EnBW doing? We produce, trade, and transport electricity, gas, water, and heating. So we are a fully integrated utility company. But what is very important, we are in, or let's say we went through a transformation process within the last 7 or 8 years, a transformation from conventional to renewable energy. We developed, or we are in some parts developing to an infrastructure provider. What has this to do with integrated reporting? It has very much to do with integrated reporting because in our transformation process, sustainability is an integral part of our corporate strategy. Can we go further, please? Yes, here you can see our 3 business fields. It's smart infrastructure for customer, it's system critical infrastructure, and sustainable generation infrastructure. Next slide, please. Ich habe leider keine passenden Einträge gefunden. Sorry. Yes, and here is our strategy 2025, our vision and our understanding of sustainability. This is very important, as I already said, to know, because it's, let's say, the basis to understand why integrated reporting is so relevant for us. And of course, it's very important for our stakeholders. Can we move on, please? Now let's dive into integrated reporting. Where are we today? I would say we have a clear stakeholder focus through our integrated reporting. This not only involves our investors and shareholders, it also involves our customers, employees, and our partners. And when we develop a huge project, as for example offshore wind parks, partners are extremely important for us. And we have now, in the meantime, in the early beginning of this year, published our 7th integrated report. Yes, and I would say that in the meantime, both financial and non-financial KPIs are not only included, but also very important and relevant to our stakeholders. Can we move on? Thanks. What were the milestones of our integrated reporting journey? You can see that in 2003 we had our first sustainability report, and in 2012 we started with a combined report, a financial and sustainability report. In 2014 then we had, let's say, our first really integrated report. And up to 2017 we included the NFID and the TCFD recommendations in our integrated report. And in 2020 So in our last integrated report, we included also the EU taxonomy. We had a project to fulfill the EU requirements on a voluntary basis. Next slide, please. Thanks. When we introduced integrated reporting in 2012, we were strongly influenced by the financial crisis and by the upcoming or the intensive discussion about climate change. These two milestones showed not only us, but especially for our business model, that the traditional form of corporate reporting was and is no longer up to date. New concepts of corporate reporting were necessary, and the concept of integrated reporting were under those circumstances a logical further development. We say it was rather an evolution than a revolution. After, and then can we go further, please? Thanks. After 3 years of project, we published our first integrated report in 2014. What were the main areas where we developed further? First, I have to mention our business model became more precise. A broader reporting of the performance of our business we achieved with integrated reporting. And also we report short, mid and long-term financial and non-financial KPIs. Reporting how our business goals are linked with each other. And of course, we had a reduction of our business report. The reduction was 120 pages. And what were our key factors when we introduced integrated reporting? First of all, it was an intensive involvement of different departments and a delegation of project tasks. We will have a look on our project structure later. Another key success factor was introducing. Now, can we slip back, please? Another key success factor was introducing a much more deeper integrated thinking. Silos were broken, and then we had our focus more on a future-orientated than on a governance-orientated reporting. We always had our main stakeholders in mind, and last but not least, we began our participation in the IRC National Committee. And with that, we can move on, please. Thanks. We built our reporting on the IRC framework, and we tried to fulfill especially these 4 main principles. Less is more, integrated thinking, as I already mentioned, an holistic approach, and performance orientation. Yes, and finally, can we go to the next slide? Finally, I want to show you our project structure from 2012. The sustainability department and the accounting department had the lead of our project in 2012. And as I mentioned before, then we gave different departments separate project tasks, and through this we developed a more, as let's say, work together and a more integrated thinking through all the departments at the end. What were these different departments? We had the strategy department, the marketing department, of course, our controlling department, and the communication department. These departments had sub-projects in their responsibility. the business model, stakeholder orientation, corporate performance, and report structure. In more detail, you can see on this slide the different work packages we delegated to the different departments. The range is from the definition of interdependencies among business goals through our strategy department, a stakeholder survey from our marketing department that was performed, the collection of data, of course, through our controlling department, and the definition of the communication medium from our marketing department. Finally, I want to underline that especially these, I would say, teamwork has helped us tremendously today, also today, for example, when we now introduce or fulfill further reporting requirements, for example, the EU taxonomy, as I mentioned. And with this, I want to thank you very much for your attention, and I would like to hand over to Jeremy. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much to Michael and to Cora and to Lisa for some very insightful presentations. Really wonderful to see the Getting Started guide being the overview that Lisa provided, and hear directly from two report preparers about the challenges and the benefits of adopting the integrated reporting framework. So we've had some questions that have come in from the audience. And I think I'm going to start with one which we do get asked quite frequently. So perhaps if Cora and Michael as well could switch on their cameras, that's great. So the first one I think I'm going to address to Lisa, and it's to do with the merger, not surprisingly, of the RRC with SASB, and what impact this has on corporate reporting. So Lisa, to paraphrase the question we've had, if I am an integrated report preparer, must I now do the SASB standards? And likewise, if I'm a SASB, must I now do the integrated reporting framework? So what was the guidance from our technical team on that one, please?
Okay, so good question. One that I receive very frequently on a daily basis. Quick answer is no. Organizations aren't required to use both instruments. That said, so there's going to be a caveat, so no requirement, but I do think that for those who are just getting started, there is a certain logic and benefit to using both. So if you're starting, if you're preparing an integrated report and you're early in those stages, there is some benefit and some logic, as I say, to consulting the SASB standards, certainly as part of the materiality determination process. Or in supporting the integrated reports performance discussion. And I say this because, in 77 industries, the SASB standards flag particular sustainability risks and opportunities that are reasonably likely to affect financial performance. And the standards also help preparers identify relevant topics and metrics for external reporting purposes. So you're going to see that complementarity if you do use them together. But again, it is not required. If we look at the flip side, if you are already using SASB standards, but the world of integrated reporting is brand new to you, I would suggest that you have already taken a very important step with SASB standards, because they inherently link important disclosure topics for your given industry to financial performance and enterprise value. There may be other issues that go beyond the realm of quote unquote sustainability topics, and the integrated reporting framework does cover a broader information set through 6 forms of capital or resources and relationships. Integrated reporting will likely extend and deepen your view in avenues like manufactured capital, financial capital, and intellectual capital, for example. And I know I'm going on a little bit here, but just sort of wrapping up, the integrated reporting framework will help you to sort of draw those important connections between and across content that you're already preparing. So very long story short, and I apologize. Like I said in my earlier remarks, we do see these as being very complementary instruments. And if you're keen to get started with both, yeah, you're in luck. We're launching a guide to getting started today.
Great, thank you. So encouragement to do both, but not an instruction to do both.
Precisely. Good, Tracy.
Right. Okay, thank you. And Lisa, if I might just stay with you for one moment. The other question we've had, which I'm sure is on the mind of many people, is about the planned launch this November of the International Sustainability Standards Board. And the question is the Value Reporting Foundation planning to merge with the ISSB in the future? So that's a good one. Over to you for that one.
Oh, if I had a crystal ball. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. I cannot answer that. All I can say is that, like I mentioned in my earlier remarks, we are very supportive of looking for this more simplified and comprehensive corporate reporting system. And so we are actively working as part of the IFRS Foundation's Technical Readiness Working Group along various work streams, various avenues. So we're very supportive, and I'll leave it at that.
Great, thank you, Lisa. So the questions are flooding in, and I'm not inventing this; they really are there, which is great. So keep them coming. I'm going to ask a question of Cora and Michael, which is to do with how do you measure the value that you've created. Cora, I thought your slide was very helpful in terms of distinguishing between sustainability disclosures that have a particular sort of ESG slant and those that have more of a focus on impact and outcomes. But you both work for organizations that have given a great deal of thought to this. And of course, in the absence of international sustainability standards, there's a whole range of different approaches one could take to measurement. But perhaps you could both explain a little bit about how you've done that, Cora with Better Energy or Novo Nordisk, and Michael with EnBW. So perhaps Cora, if you could go first, that would be great.
So one of the things that are important when we talk about value creation is on making sure that it's not just about necessarily something that can be monetized. Value creation can take different shapes and forms. One, I really like to work with the value creation on 3 different levels. So there is the value that you create for yourself as a business. Then you can create value by helping others reduce their negative impact. And then you can help others create value by helping them create value. And I know that sounds maybe a bit, lucid, but it's actually also part of how the Future Fit framework is defined. So you have to be very clear on the value that you destroy. And then you have those 3 parameters within which you can actually start mapping the value that you create or how you help others create value. But I think the important piece is not being too focused on the dollars and euros and Danish crowns, if you will.
Great, thank you, Cora. And Michael, how have you approached this at EnBW?
Yes, I mean, I already mentioned during the slides or in the presentation that I think very good for us was the collaboration between the departments, and how do we measure the value of integrated reporting is, for example, now, as some of you will probably know, we had some green we had some green finance now, and for green finance, for example, you need especially the collaboration between departments, and so we had a very good practice in the last years through our integrated reporting work together. And of course, we have also we got the tone of the top in our since we had our integrated reporting. We the business goals and our targets were much more clearer. Also, were not only finance orientated into the board meetings, but also the non-financial targets were discussed. And so that I would say is these are the main advantages where we can measure the value of our integrated reporting.
Great, thank you both. And here's a chestnut of a question, which I'm sure all of you could talk about for many hours. How do you currently differentiate between integrated reporting and sustainability reporting, assuming you still do? So Lisa, I know this is a particular favorite of yours. What's your view on this? Is there a difference?
Yes, there is a difference. That's the quick answer. Integrated reporting draws on multiple strands of information. So it draws on, for example, traditional financial reporting and financial statements. It will draw on governance related disclosures or governance policies and procedures and processes. It draws on strategy and strategic, the UK has the strategic report. It would absolutely draw on sustainability information. So it's what integrated reporting is about is harnessing that entire suite of communications and putting together a coherent sort of end-to-end story about how the organization creates value. So yes, there is a difference, highly related, but there is that distinction to be made.
Great. And Cora, how did you approach that, or how are you approaching it with Better Energy, or how did you with Novo Nordisk in terms of that distinction?
Right. So at Novo Nordisk, who've been doing integrated reporting since 2004. Back then it was combined reporting, but we call it integrated reporting. There is just one report. The sustainability report, the ESG report was phased out over time, and there was just this one really concise report. At Better Energy, which is, like I said, a fairly young company, we have not done integrated reporting as well. The company is really integrated in terms of thinking and management. And we need to make sure that that is also captured in the reporting going forward. There are elements in that, but they've only produced a very few reports. So, but we will get them.
And I remember very clearly reading Novo Nordisk's triple bottom line report for the first time. And it was the first time I genuinely enjoyed reading an annual report. So it was great to see a very different approach being adopted. And of course, that was completely radical at the time. I'm not sure anybody else in the world was thinking about the broader impacts that a company was having. And Michael, how do you distinguish between the two, or perhaps you combine the two with at EnBW, the sustainability report and the integrated report?
Yes, I think that you have on the one side, we had a sustainability report. On the other hand, then I told you up from 2014 we had our first integrated report, and I think the most difficult is it, but the most value is when you succeed in combining this financial impact of non-financial things. Yes, so it's a sustainability report. You have only, or you have in the mainly qualitative information, and an integrated report. It's very difficult, and you have to combine. You have to have this financial impact of non-financial things.
Great, thank you, Michael. And I'm going to ask a question about one of my favourite topics, which is integrated thinking. So as we saw in Lisa's slide, integrated reporting and integrated thinking are mutually reinforcing. And the question is, how does the preparation activities for an integrated report help the development of integrated thinking? What should we pay attention to when preparing our integrated reports in terms of stimulating integrated thinking? So maybe Cora, I'll start with you, and we'll hear a sort of report preparer perspective.
Sure. So one of the beautiful things about a report is that once it's out there, it's out there. And you're committed. So one of the things that we spent a lot of time conversing about and discussing was, so how do we actually talk about commitments and target setting and aspirations? Because once it's out there, it's out there. And that's actually quite powerful in terms of continuing the integrated thinking conversation, because once it's out there, it's out there. And if you don't meet, and I'm not saying this in any way to deter people or companies from making commitments, because that's really, really important to show to the world that you're committed. But once you're in that loop of transparency and responsibility and communication, you have to follow up. This whole conversation about accountability. So if you 1 year set targets, you of course have to account for them next year. And if you see that you will not be meeting them, then you of course have to account for that. And then that feeds back into the company. So we need to readjust. How do we manage? So there's this whole continuous reinforcing loop where it's backwards perhaps, but where we can actually see reporting being a force of integrated thinking, because now you are in this loop of accountability and integrity and transparency and communication, which is good. It's a good thing.
Great, well, thank you. And that's a very lucid metaphor of the sort of mutually reinforcing virtuous loop. And Michaela, at EnBW, how does integrated reporting and integrated thinking interact with one another?
Yes, I would say that if you ask some business leaders or top management if they are able to think integrated, everybody would say yes, we are able to. But once you have to start with an integrated report, let's say you are more in a way you have to report, you have to work together, collaborate in the departments, and I would say that it becomes more transparent, that you have to think integrated. So I would say that of course that when you start with integrated reporting, this would of course bring further your integrated thinking then.
Great.
And make it more transparent. And make it more, yeah.
Great. And Lisa, how does that chime with the official view?
So the official clinical view is
clinical view.
Yes, so the integrated reporting framework has a formal definition for what integrated thinking is, but if I keep it very simple, it is about connecting the organization to the capitals or resources, relationships on which it relies or on which it has an effect. And so there's a famous diagram in the framework that looks at the process for creating, preserving, or eroding value. And you'll see these sort of 6 inputs and 6 outputs in the forms of these 6 forms of capital. You know, working through that process for disclosure purposes forces one to think about, well, what do we depend on here, and where are we having our effects, for better or for worse? And so it actually kind of forces that integrated thinking approach.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And I'm going to do a quick plug here for the integrated thinking principles, which we will be launching during our annual symposium in December. And if you want to get a sense of what they're like, do have a look at our integrated thinking case studies. We've got an expanding library of these on the VRF website. And then finally, just one question, sort of quick fire round. How have your stakeholders, including investors, responded to your integrated reports at EnBW and Better Energy and Novo Nordisk? Aren't they more focused on the specific metrics, it's quite hard to say that, than the principles used? So, Mikhail, how do you, I don't think EnBW has investors as such, but you obviously have your bondholders, but how have your investors and stakeholders responded to your integrated report?
Yes, as you said, we have many stakeholders, and for example, also our employees are stakeholders, and also our customers. And of course, when you look at for new talents to get in your process to get new people from the universities. We had a very good good influence of integrated reporting, because you can show all the students that you are that our company its sustainability has a strong impact on our reporting and on our thinking. For example, this is one example for a positive influence of our stakeholders. And of course, when you look at green finance, we launched green bonds, and of course there it's also very positive for us to have an integrated reporting.
Great, thank you, Michael. And finally, Cora, how have your investors and stakeholders responded to your integrated report?
So I can only speak on behalf of Novo Nordisk at this time, but we were very specific in terms of defining the audience, the receivers of the report, as providers of financial capital. And they've been very positive, because it's a very structured and concise report to cater to the remaining stakeholders. We've built a universe online. So I think it's important from a reporteur's perspective to be very clear on the receiver of the report.
Great, well, thank you. I'm going to wrap up our session now. Thank you to our three speakers, Lisa and Cora and Michael. It's been great to have you with us and to hear these different perspectives. Thank you to everybody who joined today's webinar. The Getting Started Guide will be available to download from our website. I'm sure you'll be looking to curl up this evening with a cup of cocoa and the Getting Started Guide to integrated reporting. And I'm going to finish with Cora's words, because I like these very much. So as you think about your integrated reporting plans, be patient, be relentless, and kick butt. Thank you very much, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event and webinar.
Have a good one.